All right, let's jump right in. Today we're doing a deep dive into Numbers chapter 14. This is really a pivotal moment for the Israelites.
Absolutely. It's right after the spies, the scouts, have come back from the Promised Land, and, well, their report just ignites a full-blown crisis.
Yeah, the reaction is immediate and intense, isn't it? The text says the whole community just wept aloud all night.
It paints such a vivid picture, not quiet tears, but like this public outpouring of grief and despair.
Mm.
It shows how deeply that negative report hit them.
And that grief, it doesn't stay grief for long. It sours pretty quickly into something else.
Right, into grumbling, serious grumbling against Moses and Aaron. They're saying things like, if only we died back in Egypt, or even out here in the desert.
The fear is just overwhelming. They're convinced going forward means death, that their families, their little ones, will be carried off as plunder.
And that fear leads them to, well, frankly, an astonishing suggestion. They actually start saying to each other, let's pick a new leader. Let's go back to Egypt.
Back to slavery, after everything. It's hard to fathom.
It really shows the power of fear to completely warp perspective, doesn't it?
So faced with this mass despair, this outright rebellion, what do Moses and Aaron do?
The text is simple, but powerful. It just says they fell face down, right there in front of everyone.
Wow. A posture of what? Humility, desperation, pleading before God?
Probably all of the above.
Yeah.
A clear sign of aligning themselves with God against this wave of human panic.
But amidst all that chaos, two figures emerge with a totally different take.
Yes, Joshua and Caleb. The text makes a point of identifying them as two of the men who actually went on that scouting trip.
And their reaction is starkly different. They tear their clothes, which is a sign of distress, right? But not despair.
It's exactly distress at the people's unbelief. But their message is one of, well, radical faith. They saw the same things the others saw.
Same land, same inhabitants, same fortified cities.
But their conclusion is the polar opposite. They insist the land is exceedingly good. You know, that classic phrase, a land flowing with milk and honey.
So they're not downplaying the reality, but they're seeing it through a different lens.
Precisely. Through the lens of God's promise. And their call isn't just about the land's quality. It's about trust in God himself.
What do they actually say to the people?
They challenge the fear directly. They say, look, if the Lord is pleased with us, he will lead us into that land and give it to us. It's conditional on God's pleasure on their obedience.
And they urge them not to rebel.
Critically, only do not rebel against the Lord. And then the killer line against fear. And do not be afraid of the people of the land, because we will swallow them up. Their protection is gone, but the Lord is with us. Do not be afraid of them.
Wow. Talk about a counter-narrative. They're essentially saying the enemy's strength is irrelevant if God is on your side.
Exactly. It's a powerful call to faith over fear.
So how does this message go down with the terrified, grumbling crowd?
Not well. Tragically, instead of calming them, it infuriates them. The reaction is immediate and violent.
What did they do?
The text says the whole assembly started talking about stoning Joshua and Caleb.
Stoning them. For speaking faith.
Yeah. It's a chilling moment. Faith met with the threat of lethal violence. The tension is just immense.
And it's right at that peak, isn't it, that something else happens, something divine?
Yes. Suddenly the glory of the Lord appears. Right there at the tent of meeting, visible to all the Israelites, God himself steps into the situation.
And his reaction, I imagine it wasn't pleased.
Not at all. He speaks directly, essentially asking Moses, how long will these people treat me with contempt? How long will they refuse to believe me after everything I've done right in front of them?
You can feel the frustration, the divine exasperation.
Absolutely. And his initial proposed judgment is incredibly harsh.
What does he propose?
He says, I will strike them down with a plague and destroy them. Just wipe them out for their rebellion.
Oh. But then he offers Moses something else.
Yes, it's fascinating. He tells Moses, but I will make you into a nation greater and stronger than they. Like a do-over, starting with Moses.
But Moses doesn't take the deal. He argues for the people.
He does. He intercedes. And his argument is really interesting. It's strategic. It's not just, oh, please be merciful.
What's his line of reasoning?
He focuses on God's reputation. He says, look, the Egyptians, all the other nations, they've heard about your power, how you brought us out, how you're present with us in the cloud and fire.
Right. They know the story so far.
Exactly. So Moses argues if you destroy them now in the desert, what are those nations going to say? They'll say, the Lord wasn't able to bring them into the land he promised, so he killed them off in the wilderness.
He's appealing to God's own honor and consistency.
Precisely. He's saying your reputation's on the line here, and then he goes deeper.
How so?
He reminds God of his own declared character,
Yeah.
quoting back God's description of himself, slow to anger, abounding in love, forgiving sin and rebellion.
But he includes the other side too, doesn't he?
Yes, crucially.
Yeah.
But who does not leave the guilty unpunished? He's not asking God to ignore the sin, but to act consistently with his loving, forgiving nature, just as he has pardoned them repeatedly since Egypt.
It's a masterful appeal, really, grounded in who God is.
It really is. A plea for forgiveness based on God's own revealed character and past actions.
So after Moses lays all that out, how does the Lord respond?
The immediate response is direct. I have forgiven them, as you asked.
Forgiveness granted. Seems like Moses succeeded completely.
Well, yes and no. There's a huge nevertheless that follows immediately. Forgiveness is given, but consequences remain.
So what are the consequences?
God swears an oath. He says, as surely as I live, not one of the men, specifically those 20 years old or older who were counted in the census, who saw my glory and the signs I performed, yet disobeyed me and tested me. And get this, these 10 times.
10 times. The text actually counts them.
It specifies 10 times, showing this isn't the first instance of rebellion. Not one of them will ever see the land I promised on oath to their ancestors.
So that entire generation that came out of Egypt, the adults, they forfeit the promise.
Except for 2. The oath explicitly excludes Caleb because he has a different spirit and follows me wholeheartedly, and Joshua is also spared.
Caleb and Joshua, the faithful scouts, they get to go in.
They do. Their faithfulness preserves their inheritance.
But what about the children? The ones the parents were so afraid would be captured.
This is maybe the most profound part of the judgment. God says those very children they feared for, they will be the ones to enter the land. They will enjoy the land their parents rejected.
Wow, what a reversal. So the parents' greatest fear is turned on its head.
Completely. Meanwhile, the bodies of that grumbling generation, they will fall in this wilderness.
And how long will this wilderness period last?
40 years. And the reason given is incredibly specific. The children will wander as shepherds for 40 years, suffering for your unfaithfulness, until that entire generation dies off.
40 years.
Connecting back to the
40 days the spies were in the land. The text explicitly states it. For 40 years, 1 year for each of the 40 days you explored the land, you will suffer for your sins. A year for a day? That's chillingly precise. A direct consequence.
Absolutely. And God emphasizes the certainty. I, the Lord, have spoken, and I will surely do these things to this whole wicked community. They will meet their end in this wilderness. Here they will die.
So, judgment pronounced. What happens right away? Is there an immediate fallout?
Yes. The men who actually brought back the negative report, the ones who spread the fear and doubt, they are struck down by a plague and die right then and there before the Lord.
So the instigators face immediate consequence.
Exactly. And it underscores again that only Joshua and Caleb from that original group of 12 explorers survived.
How do the rest of the people react when Moses tells them all this? The judgment, the 40 years?
The text says they mourned bitterly. The weight of it finally hits them, the loss of the promise for their generation.
But that mourning doesn't seem to lead to quiet acceptance, does it? What do they do the next morning?
This is another strange, tragic turn. Early the next day, they decide to go up towards the hill country anyway.
Wait, after being told they won't enter?
Yes. They even say, we have sinned. But then they follow it with, now we will go up to the place the Lord promised. It's like this presumptuous attempt to undo their mistake by just forging ahead.
On their own terms, basically, without God's command this time.
Exactly. And Moses warns them immediately. He says, why are you disobeying the Lord's command? This will not succeed.
He tells them straight up, it's doomed.
He does. He says the Lord is not with them because they turned away from him. He warns they'll be defeated by the Amalekites and Canaanites who are already there.
Do they listen?
No. The text says, nevertheless, in their presumption, they went up toward the high hill country. But then it adds a critical detail.
What's that?
Though neither Moses nor the Ark of the Lord's covenant moved from the camp. They went without God's presence, without leadership.
And the result?
Predictably disastrous. Just as Moses warned, the Amalekites and Canaanites living there came down, attacked them, and beat them back all the way to a place called Hormah. Total defeat.
So their attempt to fix their sin through their own initiative just led to more failure.
A tragic exclamation point on their rebellion and unbelief.
Wow. Okay, so pulling back from the details of Numbers 14, what are the big themes, the major takeaways from this chapter?
Well, you really see the stark contrast, don't you? between widespread fear and unbelief, which is contagious and paralyzing, and then the courageous faith of just two individuals, Joshua and Caleb.
Yeah, the power of doubt versus the power of faith.
Absolutely. And then there's the whole interplay between God's justice and his mercy.
Yeah.
He forgives, yes, because Moses asks, appealing to his character. But forgiveness doesn't just erase the consequences of persistent rebellion and contempt.
The punishment is still enacted. A whole generation misses out.
Right. The promise itself isn't canceled, but access to it is delayed, dramatically redefined because of their choices. It really highlights how seriously God takes unbelief and disobedience, and that our choices have, real long-term, even generational consequences.
And some of those specific details really hammer it home.
They really do. That mention of testing God 10 times puts this final judgment in context. It wasn't just one mistake. The symmetry of the punishment, 40 years for 40 days, is so striking.
And the irony of the children inheriting what the parents feared losing.
Such a powerful twist. And then that final failed attempt to charge into the land, and it just underscores the futility of trying to achieve God's purposes through human effort alone, especially after direct disobedience. You need his presence, his command.
It's a heavy chapter for sure, a journey completely rerouted by a moment of crisis, by a choice driven by fear.
It certainly is. It shows how pivotal these moments of facing uncertainty can be.
So, maybe a final thought for you, our listeners, to take away from this deep dive. When you face your own moments of fear or uncertainty, maybe when the report looks bad, where's your default? Is it towards the kind of fear that paralyzed the Israelites, the kind that looks back towards Egypt? Or is it towards the kind of faith Joshua and Caleb showed, trusting God even when the obstacles look huge? And think about this too. What are the ripple effects, the consequences down the line, maybe not just for you, but for others, depending on which path you choose?